All right, it's kind of settled down. I'm sure we'll be gathering people as we go here, but let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. I've got 5:05. It is July 21st, and we have a special board meeting. And we'll just get right into it and start with our first item on the Return to Learn plan. So I will turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, guys. Welcome, everybody, and good evening. I guess I wanted to say or want to recognize that in this past week, there's been many changes for our students, families, and community stakeholders after the administrative team's recommendation and subsequent unanimous board decision to start the year off-site last Tuesday. The governor issued a proclamation that was followed by Department of Education guidance that was not anticipated and inherently conflicts with the planning work the district's been engaged in over the past several weeks and months. The largest and most problematic component of the proclamation and guidance is that it states districts shall not be able to take action to provide instruction primarily through remote learning opportunities. And since that time, the department has defined that at the 50% threshold. Tonight, we want to state and affirm that our plans and tonight we want to state that we affirm our plans and commitment to them and still feel that this is our best approach for August 24th. The district will be seeking permission for our need to start in an offsite environment and for our hybrid plan as presented also last week that is under that 50% threshold. We also believe it's important to have flexibility and timeliness on when we decide to close our district and district buildings. The recent guidance seems to create overly restrictive measures to do so. Part of the problem is we won't receive some of those criterion until the first week in August. We're not sure exactly what number they will use or what data points they will use for that. But right now it's defined that a building or district closure should be done in collaboration with the Iowa Department of Education and the Iowa Department of Public Health. And if we were to close a building or if we were to close a classroom or a section of a building, that should be done in collaboration with Johnson County Public Health and the Iowa Department of Public Health. So those are both kind of key components for us to consider as well, that the ability to need to move very quickly or swiftly in this situation is somewhat seeming like a cumbersome process right now. And so we'll need to continue to work with the Department of Ed there to clarify that. They told us they would assured us that they would get that guidance out. And so we're eagerly awaiting that to know what some of those transition points might look like. To the end, to be in compliance with the some of the state proclamation or the governor's proclamation, where we have some additional work to do. Tonight, we've added a continuum, a model onto our continuum that shows how we could reach the 50% threshold that the state has identified we need to get to. That takes our AA offsite day BB model and adds a fifth day into the week, where 1 week would have 3 A days and the second week would have 3 B days, and that would get us to that 50% threshold. And so you can see it on our continuum attached there to board docs all the way to the far right next to the fully on-site model. I would say the good news from the proclamation, just as far as continuing with some updates here, the good news from the proclamation would have been that we will not receive less funding for students that choose to take the online option. We're glad to hear them affirm that the online option can be guaranteed to families that select into that option. And so we'll come out with some further indicators and information around that for our families as well. But there was no less funding that the district would receive in that regard. So that was a positive. I think as a follow-up, we intend to engage our parents and staff soon about their plans for the fall. And by soon, we hope that some of that happens yet this week or the beginning of next week. Students, that would look like in the way of e-registration to get that process started, knowing that there's still some multitude of options we need to provide to students as we work to clarify exactly what August 24th will look like. And then also a staff survey around some of their intentions, knowing again that right now we're still a little uncertain where we're going. But as I started with, we'd like to believe that we'll be granted permission to start the way that the board passed the community's wishes there last week in that regard. And so we'll work through that process continually with the Department of Ed here. And then I think the final thing that we had talked about having a conversation around this evening, but that will be delayed, is the athletics and activities conversation, and just that there's been no decisions made locally yet at this time. Of course, being a little bit unclear on where school stands for the 24th, we want to make sure that we do the things in the right order. And so that one we have not made a local decision or recommendation around. But I would just say thank you for your patience as we work through this process. We recognize that continued patience is becoming difficult, but we're committed to providing further direction once we get answers and some additional guidance from the Department of Ed. So that's kind of our update for you guys this evening. You have the supporting documents attached into board docs. Like I said, the updated continuum, the FAQ sheet that was provided to us by the Department of Ed, also the guidance and proclamation where that FAQ would have been developed from. And so I think more for this evening, we thought it might be useful to answer questions if people had them. But that's kind of, I guess, a status update of where we've been since Friday and work that occurred over the weekend and here then Monday, Tuesday. So
I'm going to start this off because I think this has been a point of confusion, and I think it might only even be clarified for anybody that's actually watching this now. So hopefully a lot of people take the opportunity to watch this. But I think there's some, I guess, some misunderstanding. What does it look like differently between the opt-in online learning program versus, I'm going to use a different word, off-site learning, which is what our vote was last week to start the year off-site. They're both, not in school, and so I think people are having a hard time wrapping their heads around what do they look like? Why do they look different, or how are they different? And so if we can get some kind of high-level distinction there, I think that will help folks at least understand that as they're making the decision to do opt-ins and stuff, if they have to do that, if we're not starting fully off-site. And then the other question that has come up is if they do opt into the online learning program, I believe we did talk about it last week, but there was sort of an ask for a certain amount of time, a commitment to how long you would stay in that before you decide to pull out and rejoin regular learning. So if we can hit on that as well, I think that would help folks understand.
Yeah, I'll provide a little context and then maybe let Adam talk a little bit more as he does a good job with some of the specific components around this. But I think, Sean, the key piece there is it's a little bit easier if folks are listening, or if you want to pull up the graphic that shows the continuum of models, to think about comparing it to if we say we had recommended that we were going to start on-site, so people in the buildings and classrooms, then parents would have a choice, or will have a choice, to opt their kids into that K-12 Iowa City Community School District online learning program. And then that's the kind of the model they are in, and the classes that they're signed up for, and the teachers that would deliver that program. When we're in an offsite environment, as was recommended to start the year, those students would be engaged with their classroom peers from their home building, and their classroom teacher from their home building. And so the other one is really a full district program, the K-12 program, a standalone to the rest of it. And the other one would really be delivered by their classroom teacher, and they'd be engaged with their homeschool peers in that fashion. And so, Adam, as far as some other specifics to that, I'll let you jump in from there.
Yeah, I would say to the question of, how does it look different? If the reality is, I think not very much. If you look at being in a full-time off-site model like we had planned to start the year versus the online program, the continuous online program. I don't think that there's a whole lot of difference in terms of what those courses would look like, with the exception of the full-time online program, the PK-12 online program. There's no plan for that class to transition back on site. So that may affect certain elements of instruction, but for the most part, it's using the same platform. It's using the same curriculum. It's mapped in the same way. to the standards and the activities that students would participate in, whether they're in the full-time online program or if they're off-site because the district has moved off-site. I don't think there'd be a huge difference. However, as Matt alluded to, one key difference is that students who, when we put together sections for that online coursework, the fully online program, that would not be building dependent. And that's largely due to numbers. You know, when we look at percentages, and we don't yet know what percentage of our students will opt into that program, but to be able to offer our, you know, as much of our course catalog as possible across the district, will really be pulling students from multiple buildings to constitute those online courses. So students will be more likely to have courses with kids they don't necessarily know, at least at the start of the class, but we still look to create opportunities for collaboration, discussion, that sort of thing. So people will have a chance to get to know each other even in that online setting. I think there was another question too about transition points, and Amy, I don't know if you want to speak to that one.
Yeah, Adam, can you clarify transition between models?
Yeah, I think, no, sorry, we use words in such weird ways now. The trimester, you know, whether we'd be looking at, you know, people being able to move between, you know, that fully online program.
Yeah, this is something that we're having to think hard about because our ability to turn around staffing is really where this piece comes in. And so we've got some internal deadlines. We're making that decision about how often somebody could opt in. I mean, we've certainly thrown around the idea of trimesters, but it's really our ability to be able to staff it at and have some lead time to do that. So whether families are opting back into the traditional standard enrollment and say we're in hybrid model or on-site, it's just we need to figure out what kind of lead time we need with that.
So one question that I think may kind of clear it up. If we start fully off-site, and we discussed last week, right? That's a very, I don't want to use the word regimented, but it's scheduled, right? It's a daytime schedule, a normal learning schedule. Can parents opt into the online learning program, even if we're fully off-site, just to have it be a more asynchronous type schedule?
Yeah, definitely. And I think
Yes.
there'd be reasons they'd want to consider that, right, Sean? If they know that an on-site option is never going to work for their family because of a family member that may have a health condition, or if their student does, then that may be an option they'd want to select even if we started an off-site, because the goal is to have people on-site in school buildings at some point when we feel comfortable doing so for health and safety reasons. But I think, yes, that would be an example where they definitely could and probably would want to do that option because of, you know, avoiding transitions and some of those things like I just talked about.
I'd add too, just real quickly, that our process for understanding parent intentions will happen through the e-registration process through PowerSchool. So think about when you're in PowerSchool and making the updates, and there's a series of parent permissions that we ask you to work through. There's going to be a page in there that's going to ask our families what their intentions are for the school year. Do they want the standard enrollment process? And that could include whatever return to learning model that we're in at the time, or the PK-12 online program. And we are working to build a page out on our website right now that's going to include more detailed information around what you can expect in that PK-12 online learning program.
So just to kind of clarify a few things, if a family needs predictability and consistency, the only type of predictable model that we can offer at this point in time is the opt-in online program. Is that a fair statement?
I think that's fair, Lisa. That's the one we know will be consistently offered throughout the period of time. And so I think that is an accurate statement in that regard. The other ones are going to involve transitions and potential shifting around. And so I think that's fair.
And then is it also fair, Matt, to say that the more families that opt into the online system, the more resources in terms of teachers and staff we will be able to devote to that program? If we get 20% of parents who opt in, we're looking at putting 20% of our teaching staff online. If we get 80% of parents who opt in, we're going to put 80% of our teaching online.
Right. I mean, I think that's, there's other factors obviously we use in the district, but in general, right, our resources flow where the kids are. And so if we have a high number of students in the online learning program, then we're going to need more staff to deliver that. Potentially we'll look at class sizes and some of those things, depending on how many we get, and, at different grade levels and some of those components and high school courses in that regard. But I think you're exactly right. The more students that are signed into that, the more staff resources we're able to put behind that as well.
And then would it also be safe to say, again, the more students that get signed into that, I think you alluded to this, but again, the diverse courses that we'll be able to offer, if we have one student who wants to take AP history, we might not be able to offer that class in an online setting. If we have 30 students who opt in and want to take online AP World History, are we going to be in a better position to offer those classes?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely, right? I mean, the more students we have signing up for courses, part of this is in our course development right now, and teachers working to develop these courses. Obviously, interest in those courses is going to drive our ability to be able to offer and teach those courses in an online environment. Like you said, it'd be a lot more challenging to do that for one student. But of course, we think about like one high school student and wanting to have access to their full schedule, and that this is the program they need because of maybe an underlying health condition, then we want to do what we can to try to deliver on that too. But like you said, I think if we're really fairly articulating the challenge to parents, I think that is those are very accurate questions and things to think about. That if we have more students over there, we can put more staff there, we can develop a more full program and catalog in that regard. And then if we think about where we started this conversation this evening, when we do try to do health and safety mitigation efforts in the school buildings, whenever we are on site, that challenge becomes easier in that sense too, right? Because we have more students in the fall online program. And so I know I've had parents personally ask me about that too. I mean, would that be helpful in a sense if their family is set up to do something like that? And it would, right? Because I mean, we're trying to lower our numbers in cases where we can. So good questions. I didn't mean to cut you off if you have more, but yep.
No, but I guess, and just to clarify too, opt-in program isn't all asynchronous learning. We envision teachers interacting with students just through a virtual environment, not a classroom environment. Is that correct?
Yeah, Adam, anything else you want to add on that one? But yes, that's correct. Doesn't look like, okay.
Matt, when you think the governor's proclamation says kids need to, or half of our student body need to attend, I'm just thinking if there was a way we could, plan on that, like making up some of that time later in the year, starting off slow and then kind of planning on, when third trimester hits, having a plan, hoping things are better at that time to be in school more. And I don't know if that's something we could think about.
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly take a crack at the calendar again and look at that as far as when we start school. That was one of our foundational decisions we worked from. And I'd say, the challenge with the timing of the proclamation, of course, is, we had some defined boxes and spaces we were working inside of that as we moved along and made decisions. And, obviously the last few days that's asked us to start looking outside those again in some of those instances. And so I think the calendar would be one we'd be happy to go back and look at. We've already done some internal conversation around that to see what options we would have. But I think the key part of the proclamation is that students have to receive half of their instruction on site. And so I know there's been questions around capacity, even the article that was shared in the Gazette today around the Cedar Rapids part. I'm not sure was as relevant as the fact that 50% of the students' instruction has to happen in person. And so that's the threshold we're really trying to reach. And so that's for every kid in that sense that's not opted into that online learning program, that on site, it's supposed to be 50% of their instruction or more happening in person. And so if that stays where we're at and we're not able to qualify, or when we request this, permission to operate in something less than that or in a full offsite program, then that's what we need to get to, JP. And so I think your point is then, is there a way to maybe backload some of that? And so we can look at options to potentially do that.
How late could we start?
I don't know if I have an exact answer to that question. If there is I don't know if anybody else on the team is familiar with that, or Brady, if you know.
Yeah, it's already, yeah. June 30th would be your end date.
Oh, that's our end date. That's the more
Your end
concerning
date.
thing,
You'd
right?
have to
Yeah,
back map
we have to get it.
because that's your contract ends June 30th, new fiscal year and new contract year is July 1st. So you'd back map it from there and figure out.
Yeah, that's going to be the problem, is we can't roll into July. And so
Well, I know everything on social media is 100% accurate. So I saw somebody had posted that there was like a December 1st date that it had to start by, but I don't know if there's any validity to that. I think backtracking from June 30th probably makes a lot more sense. But I will say we can't, it would take a calendar change. You can't just say, all right, we're going to get 50% by having 0% in the first 2 weeks and then have like 16-hour days in the last 2 weeks. It specifically says 50% over a 2-week period and an average number for all students that are on site. So it's not counting the opt-in online stuff. So it's very prescriptive that way. And I know,
yeah, we would have to shift days. You're right, Sean, is what we'd have to do, right? You'd be looking at shifting days in your calendar to later in the year, because when you're on site, or if you're going to meet that 50% threshold, you're right, it's got to happen in that 2-week window. That's why the model we presented to you tonight around the 3 A days and 3 B days work, because while students would only receive technically 40% on 1 week, they would get to their 50% by having a week that looks more above that 50% the following week.
and just kind of reading between the lines a little bit on some of the questions that are coming in. I want to make sure it's clear. I mean, Matt said that at the beginning there that, we made a decision last Tuesday that we felt it was the safest decision to start off site. And that's what we are working towards. We're trying to make sure we do all of the steps that we need to do to satisfy that. So that's, the first thing we're trying to do, but also in the second part of it, when we look to the hybrid model and we're trying to meet that 50%, there's a slight adjustment there from the model that we were presented last week to this week. But I want to make it clear that we're not backtracking on the decision that we made. We are holding to it, but we are trying to make sure that we're following, the letter of the law, if not the spirit of it anyway, to make sure that, we're doing it the right way. So we're still, like, nothing has changed between last Tuesday and today that makes us feel any safer opening the schools with our students in them. So we are doing what we can to hold true to the vote last week. And I just want to make sure that was very clear out there.
Matt, can you talk more about some of the things you're going to be surveying parents about? I know you mentioned that what the district is going to be looking for. Is it just like who wants to start regardless of where we start, whether or not they'll be opting in, or is it bringing back any of the questions that you asked in June before the numbers started looking bad here?
Sure. I think it's Amy had kind of outlined what some of those choices would be through the e-registration process. And so I think that's really more where we're looking at this point. As far as significant model changes and things like that, that we had asked in June, I don't think we're in a good position to substantially change those at this point. But I do think there's some key things around if they're knowing they would choose the full online option, or would they be comfortable with going along with whatever the district lands on or needs to be. But I think to reinforce what Sean said, yes, we're affirming that decision from last week, and that we're planning to do what we can to seek permission to start that way and to ask difficult questions for if there's some initial no's around that. But we'll work through that process, and then we'll know more as we continue to go along here. But we feel like it's also there's some urgency around getting back to our families and knowing just where they stand on wanting to pursue online, no matter the circumstance or comfort level with starting however the district does. Because that was a piece of feedback we got, right, is that their positions potentially changed since the time of that survey, or that it hasn't changed since the time of that survey. And so we wanted to come back again that way. It didn't seem very wise at this point with the quick turnaround to do another survey to try to present those results and then also come to families and ask them to do e-registration. That seemed like it'd be especially cumbersome. So we're trying to build those selections into the e-registration process.
Matt, when does e-registration open?
Matt, this is Charlie. Sorry, Janet. Go ahead, Janet.
So I just was asking when e-registration opens. What's the date?
Yeah, Amy, do you want to talk about the timeline for those components and what we've talked about today regarding registration?
Yeah, so we're trying to get the Power School rollover to happen right now, and that takes a couple days for that to be complete. The other thing that we're doing is building out pages on the website so that we are really specific about what needs to occur for our new families that are registering, as well as returning families. And we feel like if we can get that built out really well, it dovetails into also the message that we want to send around on-site registration. So as much as possible, we want to limit the traffic in our buildings, and so we're working more so than ever in the past to really detail that to families. So long story short, Friday or Monday is our goal to get a message out to our families.
Friday or Monday, but then the actual Power School will be open Monday. A week, less than a week. Okay.
Yeah.
So Matt, this is Charlie again. Where are we in getting information from the Health and Safety Committee, which is supposed to be the primary reference committee for looking at the risk that the students and staff have for being in buildings during for receiving instruction? Where are we for getting information from that committee about making that information available to parents to include in their decision making in the next few weeks?
I guess I might ask a question back on that end, Charlie, as far as what information would be helpful to know. I know, for us, as we've had that Health and Safety Committee, their recommendations and suggestions are how we built these models. And then obviously the recommendation we brought you last week around the need to start offsite in that sense. And so are there kind of specific data you're talking about, Charlie, or practices? Or, I think that's informing our work as how we build those models and then how we'll do school if we're offsite or onsite. But maybe I'm just not understanding what you're asking more specifically.
I'm just thinking for this is my perspective as a parent, as a parent of a student, which I was some years ago. I would be wanting to know what's the risk to my child for coming on now under current county conditions for instruction, as opposed to having my child stay at home and receiving off-site instruction.
So,
sure. And
sure.
Go ahead, Chase.
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying, Charlie, and I think that we're continuing to work with
changed or not?
Well, I think we're continuing to work with Johnson County Public Health on that. The committee's meeting with them, and Matt and Amy and I met with them earlier this week, and trying to get answers to that question you're asking about what are those risks. And so we're doing our best to stay in consistent contact with Johnson County Public Health and share that information as we got it, like we shared it last week. I don't know if they're going to have any sort of definitive figures that we can provide, but we will definitely make sure that we pass along that information that we receive from the county health department on that. That's who we've looked to since the beginning, and tried to partner with in trying to figure out exactly what you're talking about when we look at the risk and safety and what mitigation factors should be put in place as we balance that. So
That's probably not something that's going to come or be developed by the Health and Safety Committee. It's something that the Health and Safety Committee is going to collaborate with outside physicians and Johnson County Public Health, and then to help kind of shepherd that information back to us. So as you suggested, we could make that available to families as they consider these decisions.
And Charlie, another contact we have too that I think that is willing to help us and potentially will provide some information here for us is one of the doctors that was on our health and safety committee is connected to another pediatrician at the university that is specializes in infectious diseases. And so kind of these questions you're asking about here, you know, she is kind of thinking through like what that FAQ kind of thing might be for parents. Like, what is the level of risk? What can I do to keep my child safe, even on the staff end in that regard? Because we do know even if we're starting off site, that again, coming on site at some point could have a level of risk. And so trying to inform that from a perspective that makes people aware. And so like Chase said, I think the key point is us getting that information from those local health groups and then being able to turn that around so parents are well informed into that. And obviously the timing of that we know is important, and we're asking for some information from parents, and that some of that information will follow that. But we're going to work our best to get those components turned around.
Thank you. And I talked about student risk. Same questions apply for staff risk too.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The one thing I just might add to the conversation, and it's more so for the wider audience that's listening in tonight, is you would have seen in previous presentations where Chase, Health and Safety Committee members working with our local doctor and Johnson County Public Health, put together a protocol for potential ways we would transition both all at the classroom building and district level now. And clearly in the governor's proclamation last Friday, that process is now going to be dictated through that proclamation. And we're waiting on that guidance, of course, and we're being told that that's going to come by August 1st.
To that end, Amy, I was wondering, when the way that the proclamation reads, right, is if we decide we need to close down for an outbreak or whatever it is, we can do that in conjunction with the Department of Public Health. Is there any way to sort of vet those numbers ahead of time? Say, here's what our plan is as to when we want to close, and get the approval ahead of time, as opposed to on a case-by-case basis where we might have to wait several days when something's going on before we can take action?
Yeah, I think that's what we'd like to see come back, from them, right? Is something to that effect. That's something we had produced locally already. And so I think that is a key part of what we're hoping to see from them, is that there's guidance and metrics for when to make those decisions. And then as long as we're staying within those parameters, then that gives us confidence to be able to do that quickly. But right now we just don't really have details around what that process is going to look like.
But because we don't have those details, Matt, I mean, is it a potential scenario that we could find out about a positive COVID case in a building, have to keep that building open for 3 days for the Department of Ed in Des Moines to make a decision about our waiver request, and keep bringing children into that and staff and adults into that building? Then we'll be able to close the school and go to all online, but only for the amount of days that the department authorizes, which may not be the 14 days that we outlined in our transition plan. It could only be 2 or 3 days, and then send kids and staff back into that building. I mean, is that a potential scenario of how this could look like next year?
Yeah, I think the potential conflict could be if the measures and metrics they produce and the guidance they produce is not something that locally we feel very strong about. You saw our work, and we produced that to you in our presentations prior around the conservative take we took on the amount of cases and when we'd pull back and the amount of time, as you referenced, Lisa. And so I think that's going to be a key piece, right? When they do share that back for us, I mean, what's their palette for how many cases and what that rate of infection might look like for when they would suggest or give permission to have closed or to pull pull the district to a remote continuous learning environment. And so you're right, if we don't have that permission, then it would be like us canceling on a snow day in a sense and needing to have accounted for that time somewhere in our calendar because we wouldn't really have the authorization to be doing that day in a remote environment. The proclamation does say for snow days, I didn't say that out in my opening comments either, but that is one key piece that if we do get inclement weather days, we are allowed to deliver instruction through a remote continuous learning environment. And so unless it's more than 5 consecutive days in a row, so that would be one heck of a storm, ice storm or snowstorm or cold for us. But otherwise we are going to be able to count those days as days of instruction this year.
The word you're looking for is polar vortex.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Any other board members with questions?
Sean, it's Brady. If I would obviously yield to any questions, but if there's a chance to say something on behalf of ICEA, I'd love to do it.
Yeah, sorry, Brady. I forgot to cue you in at the end of mine there.
Oh, that's all right. So I just want to say to the directors, to all you directors and our administrative teams that I want to extend our heartfelt thanks and gratitude. And I want to remind the public attending or, who might watch this later or engage in conversations in our community that all of these directors are tireless and dedicated advocates for our students in schools. And they give us their considerable time and energy and expertise, their public service for free as volunteers. And, last week was a historic meeting. Hundreds of people had spent thousands of hours creating a plan that prioritizes the health and safety of our students, staff, and our community. And our plan was recommended by our administrative teams. It was endorsed by us and supported in a correct and courageous unanimous vote by our school board. It best meets the needs of our local community and best positions us to achieve our shared goal of having students return safely to in-person learning on our campuses. We're confident in that plan. We are appreciative of the continued support shown tonight, and we do remain hopeful we will be able to use it. I've lived in Johnson County for a fair number of years, and I love it. We're passionate, we're educated, we're politically active and engaged. And if you know me, of course, you would know I love that engagement. And one of the things as this conversation in our community has unfolded and progressed, I found it helpful for me and for the conversations that I'm in to remember some of our shared values. We all want to decrease the community spread of COVID. We accept our individual and collective responsibility in that effort. We believe deeply in the power of education in the Iowa City schools to change lives. And we know that by coming together as community partners, as we've done, we can make decisions that are best for our community. And we do want our students to return safely to our campuses for in-person learning. And importantly, nowhere in our shared values or in our dialogue is there space or tolerance for racism or bigotry, nowhere. So while the nature and the timing and extent of our return to on-site learning is typically where our differences emerge, I hope we can all continue to remember our shared values, those things that connect us, so that our dialogue about that particular difference on timing and extent can be passionate and respectful as we work together to put this incredibly challenging puzzle together. So just our sincere thank you to the directors and a reminder just to our community we're in this together. We have to be dedicated and disciplined. And I just hope we're all appreciative of the work that our school board has done. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that, Brady. I really appreciate that. I know everybody here, board members and admin and teachers and everyone else alike has been working very hard through this process. And so it has very much been a collaborative effort. So we will keep going down that path. Was there any other comments anyone wanted to make on this topic? Lisa?
I have one more question. I think just so that the community is also kind of clear about what in-person or a hybrid could look like. If we have a critical mass or a large mass of people who opt for online, it would not be our intention to have like an in-person second grade classroom with 4 students, would it? Would we then look at consolidating and closing elementary schools and bringing in kids and funneling them so that we are being smart about our teacher deployment for the in-person.
Yeah, I think if we reached a threshold in some way, Lisa, where you said it got so low, then of course we'd look at where we can create some efficiency around sections, in a building and some of those things. And then I think that's important for us to get this data just in general, right? Because we need to be able to put that staffing puzzle together and know how we deliver on those services to either students that would potentially be in the building or the students that are enrolled in the online program. And so it's a staffing puzzle and one that we need to put together. And so the only way to do that is to start to get the data and to start to work towards that. And so that's what we're committed to beginning on.
I just don't want some parents to be caught by surprise that they think that their child is going to go attend an in-person class when they will. I mean, that if we have to offer that, we certainly will, but it may not be at the elementary school 2 blocks from their house. They may find themselves in a position where now their child is in a different elementary school and it's bused. And I just.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if that scenario is likely. Yeah. And so I think I understand what you're saying, Lisa. We want people to understand the possibilities of what could happen there. But I think in that scenario, getting to the point where families would have to change schools or something like that, that'd be a pretty extreme measure. I think we would have some ability to try to work out solutions in those school buildings. Like I said, looking at section size and if we need to collapse sections, but going that other route, before we say that's necessary, I think we'd want to take a closer look at it. But I appreciate where you're going with those questions because we also want to be transparent with our people. But we'll get the data in and then we'll see how that starts to look. And if we hit a problem spot, we would certainly come back.
Yeah, and I guess the point of the question is to really emphasize that so many things are unknown right now, except for the optional online program. That
Yep.
if a parent or a family craves certainty, that's the only certainty that we can provide sitting here on July 21st.
Right. That one will be there and they can do that. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah, I appreciate Lisa's comments there because that's kind of where I was going to, trying to get clear on what we do know and being really clear on what we don't know. So we're going to open e-registration next Monday. And we'll have a messaging out on our website in advance of that. We will have the online option, which parents can opt into, and then whatever the other option is to accept whatever we end up going with. We have the waiver process that we're going through with the DE. We don't know what the outcome of that will be. And so there are uncertainties about what the other model will be. I think I'm saying that correctly. So when does e-registration end? And will parents have an option to change their selection based on the outcome of our waiver process or us getting more information? I mean, I know we're running out of time. You have staffing, scheduling, things that you need to do to get ready for teachers and students in whatever learning environment they're in. I'm just wondering if families opt into a certain option in this first wave of registration, can they change before school starts, or are they locked in? I'm just trying to understand what options families have once we start getting more information.
Yeah, and so I think the piece we'll want to share with them through that e-registration process, Janet, is what are those transition points and what are the ones we would consider. I think to specifically answer, would they be able to change before school starts? I don't know, I defer to the team there to know what specifics they've worked on that if people want to change their e-registration selections, how long they can do that after that window. If that window's closed, I'm sure that answer changes, but if it's still open, there may be some flexibility around that. Looking at commitments into those different choices, that's where we're looking at those transition points we talked about earlier. And so, like you said, I mean, some of the challenges for us are to have the necessary teachers in either spot, in a on-site, off-site, continual ebb and flow model, or the one that's a standalone and being able to deliver on that service too. And so we need to have the staff positions. And of course, when that follows the earlier comment I made about, our staff assignments follow the kids, that's important for us in that aspect. So Adam, anything you'd want to add about the transition points or the ability to change an e-registration selection once there and how long that's open?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I would add is that, as we're working on language for that e-registration option, really working to try to keep it simple, but also give as clear of choices as possible. And one of the choices that we're working to include is a conditional choice. So if the district's waiver to provide online instruction at the start of the school year is denied, then I am enrolling my student in online instruction. If it is approved, then I am enrolling my student as a standard enrollment.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
I mean, that helps. I mean, that helps a little bit. I think how you explain that, I think it'll be important, but that does help.
The other piece that I would answer is a question that you asked Janet around how long is that e-registration open? I will tell you that each and every year we struggle to get to 100% of our families e-registered. Even as the first day of class starts, we find students in our building who aren't technically have their e-registrations updated. So every year our buildings work hard. We give it a full court press to get those e-registrations done. Because as the rollover happens, we have an idea of who's returning, but unless we have the e-registration done, there's not a commitment there. And so it's incredibly important that we are given even more of a full court press this year to have as many identified and wrapped up as soon as we can. So because of the staffing component.
And I'm sure Amy and Matt, we're going to reach out to as many families, to all families in the district who oftentimes benefit from some personal attention in terms of getting their registration complete because of language issues or other issues.
Yes, certainly, Charlie. Yep, that'd be a key
talked about
part
that in
of.
the past, and I think I understand it that's your attention. You know.
And I was just going to add, and I'm probably stating the obvious, and apologies for that, but through the waiver process, I feel like really, really, and I know that y'all are going to do this. I mean, really clearly stating that Iowa City is in a unique position because of this huge influx of students who are going to be coming back into our community. They have been traveling all over the world. They're coming back into Iowa City and into this environment. And, you know, we were talking about this earlier. You know, Ames is in a similar situation, and Cedar Falls to a lesser extent. But I think that really does make this community stand out very, 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 very differently from the rest of our state and other school districts. And so again, I know we're going to do our very best in that waiver process. I know y'all are working on that now, but we are unique given this large influx of people coming back into our community.
Yeah, you know, with that and with the uncertainty on the waiver, I guess I would be for pushing the start date back. You know, given, I mean, I think every week we can buy ourselves, we have more data. And that's, you know, one thing we could be in control of is giving ourselves a little bit more time to see, you know, because that's probably my biggest question mark is what's going to happen when students are back. You know, that's a lot of people coming into town. A lot of them are going to be living in dorms. You know, these are 18, 19, 20-year-olds that, you know, might not always make responsible decisions with PPE and all that. So for me, I think if we can buy ourselves time, I think that would be helpful.
Could that be something we put on the survey, our interest in a later start date, both with our families and our staff? Is that something we want to put out there?
I think if we're going to, I'm not I certainly would want to know the parents' feedback on that. The one concern I have, Sean, about trying to turn that around and then make a decision on that is how close we get to then we'll have the feedback.
True.
You know, depending on where the feedback comes in, I think that's something we need to probably try to reach out to some groups in an informal fashion and get around the start of the school year, just because I'm not sure if we put that in e-registration or if we put that in a survey. We can work with Brady closely with the association perspective. I think if parents are hearing the conversation tonight and have feedback around the school start date, that'll help drive that too. But we can definitely bring a plan back for us to look at it. Of course, we'd love to have that feedback to know how much of an issue that is for for families. I'm just worried with our time frame of August 24th. If we're going to make a move on school start date, we probably need to do something relatively quick.
And it occurs to me too that with the return of college age students, that it'll take some time to know whether or not the prevalence of COVID in the community is going to increase because of that change in population. So I would suggest, Matt, that you have some conversations with the people that are advising the Health and Safety Committee about how much time we would actually need to know whether or not the prevalence is going to increase or not.
Sure. All right, well, we can bring, I took some notes here, obviously, as we talk throughout, and we'll definitely work on those components to go through, so, or moving forward. So we should have some more information here for you next week around that, and continue to provide you an update. We should know more about our, hopefully about the conversation surrounding the permission to start where we're at. I know that they've stated the criteria, like I said, wouldn't come out to August, but we're going to continue to try to reach out and engage in conversation to see if we can get a jump on any of that, either information or communication about our likelihood to be able to do that. So.
And again, Matt, I really appreciate your individual effort and the effort of all the staff in doing this work, which is, I know, is maddeningly complicated and changeable.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate that.
Yep, it's going to be very critical, as we move through the next, days and weeks, that, as soon as we have information that's going to affect these decisions that we've made and are making, that we get it out there as quickly as possible to everyone. I know that was one of the reasons we made the decision we did last week, right, was to get a head start on making sure everybody was prepared for August 24th and what it was going to look like. And now it kind of feels we're not on the steady footing anymore. So I'd really like to feel like we're on some steady ground again. So as quickly as we get information in, we'll try and turn it around and get it back out to anybody who needs it. One last shot for anybody who wants to make any comments on this one. Otherwise, we'll move to the next item. Going. All right, gone. All right, so we will move on to our next item. As a little background for folks, we put out a request to a third party to give us a review of the culture and climate at Lucas Elementary, and we wanted to put it out there that we have received the final draft of that report. So we wanted to get that out as soon as we had the final draft in our hands. So that is attached there. The plan is to, at the meeting next week, to kind of walk through some actionable items or some next steps that we were going to take. So there was not going to be a lot of action taken on it here, but we didn't want to sit on the report either. We wanted to make sure that it was out there as soon as we got it. So it's there. If there's any brief comments anyone wants to make, we can have those now. But again, we will have a deeper conversation about it next week. I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to add anything else there.
Yeah, I think the thing I would just like to add is that we want to make it clear we're committed to Dr. Jenkins and her leadership at Lucas Elementary, and that, like Sean identified, we'll further identify what action steps the district plan to improve the climate and culture at Lucas Elementary. And if nothing else, this report should provoke each of us to examine how we're contributing to a negative culture and climate in some instances, and what we can better do as a system to support our administrators of color. And so I know you said we'll have additional information for folks next week about specified action steps. And so we'll look forward to that conversation with you all.
Any other comments folks would like to make? All right, before we adjourn, Paul had asked to make a couple comments.
All right. Timing is everything is what people says, but I just want to let people know that this announcement does not come as a result of anything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. I have interviewed and been offered and accepted a position as a building sub within the district for this year, pending year 6 people's approval when it comes upon the board here in the next couple of meetings, hopefully. That being said, I obviously cannot stay in the role of a board director, which is super disappointing for me, but I'm very excited to be part of the teaching staff moving forward with the goal of finishing up my work to become a full-time teacher, hopefully here in the near future. So you can hear by my voice, this is not an easy decision. But as you can see by my shirt, we need teachers right now. And this outbreak is going to be especially important to have substitute teachers, which would be the role that I would be taking on. I'm very excited to be returning to Lemmy Elementary, where my students, or my daughters went to school. I know the staff there, and I'm super excited about that, and the wetlands leads ahead. So I plan on staying on until the first part of the meeting on August 25th. That's when my resignation will become official. And then you guys will have another tough decision to make in the 30 days that you get to make it. So with that being said, I just keep this short. This again has nothing to do with the decision that was made this past week or anything that's going on right now. This has been in the works for a while. If Steve was still here, he could tell you I've talked to him about this a lot. I'm very excited about the next chapter. I've been in my current position at Shields for 22 years. This is exactly half of my life. So it's time for something new, and I'm super excited about this. And this is official. I'm making the announcement, and I'm not going to serve out the rest of my term, as had been announced at our board table before, but this is actually going to happen. So just a heads up to you all. And that was all I wanted to say on that. So on the future agendas, we'll have to be adding on some topics about future planning. So that's all I wanted to say before we.
I'm going to say thank you, although I'm a little taken aback there. I was not prepared for that. I know, Paul, you have had a great relationship with our teachers in your entire time here. And so I think they will be very happy to have you join their ranks. So I would I'll say thank you for your service to this board, but I think you will continue to do great service to this district as you always have.
Yeah, Paul, this is Brady. I just want to thank you for your, tireless and, dedication and service as a board director. And I'll say we're thrilled to have you on the teacher team. So welcome. Thank you for everything.
Paul, congratulations for that major choice. Really going to miss you on the board. You've been just a foundational voice as long as I've been engaged, from a campaigner to being on the board. So we're certainly going to miss you, but as Brady said, that you're going to be amazing in the classroom, and your passion is going to shine with students. And so congratulations to you and to our district, and thank you for all of your service.
Yeah, wow. Congratulations, Paul. I guess that I can accept it because you're going to go into teaching, but you really add a lot to this board, and in your, which is different from everybody else. There's some of the things that you're into, the better boardsmanship stuff and encouraging that kind of professional development. I know I've appreciated that, and our relationship goes back a little ways, and I've really appreciated also kind of how much kind of that has grown, and I've come to really respect your work and your opinions and look for your guidance on things. But I have to say, if it's going to be that you're going into teaching, that's great, and we're lucky. that you're still going to be dedicated to the district. But yeah, pretty shocked. But I'm excited for you to be able to make that big of a change, because I know you've talked about that even going back to the first time we ran against each other, about how you kind of always wanted to be a teacher. And so I'm excited for that next chapter for you.
Paul, I just want to tell you, I'm so excited for you. This is such great news, like for you, not for us. Although I am sure that since you're P&G chair until August 25th, we'll get all that P&G stuff wrapped up for us by the 24th. But my husband teaches now, but that wasn't his first career. And I can't tell you like how radically more happy and fulfilled and like just like full of life he was when he found his teaching career. And that's what I'm so excited for you for, because like it's amazing and it's great. And like, congratulations, good luck. We're gonna miss you.
Yeah, thank you. There's a good quote from George Eliot that he said, "It's never too late to be what you might have been." And as JP said, education is something I originally applied out of high school to go to Ball State University to follow education, and ended up at Iowa. And plans change, and now they change again. So I'm happy.
Paul, I haven't known pretty well, although I did. I was really impressed when, as a member of the Equity Committee, in the last years, when we've come and talked to the board about your ask that the Equity Committee was making to the board recently. I hope that you are able to bring your experience as a board member into your classroom, and to work with and to let students know what their future holds for them. And I wish you, with others, the best of success as you make this change in your life.
I'm going to keep it short and sweet since this isn't your last meeting. But congratulations, because I know you really wanted this, but I got more to say to you, but I'll save it for the last meeting.
And since we got nothing going on, we should easily get agenda items on there to figure out what we're going to do with your replacement. We've got a lot of free time here. So it's a little weird ending on that note, but we will roast Paul later. And I think if everybody's okay with it, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Guys, take care.